Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt like you were standing before something sacred, something ancient, something not quite human? Not because of their beauty, not because of any charm, but because their face without words spoke of a presence that didn't belong to this world. And maybe, just maybe, you've caught your own reflection in the mirror and felt that same mystery stare back at you. A quiet pull, a subtle discomfort, a sense that your features, no matter how familiar, hold secrets even you haven't fully remembered. Most people laugh at these feelings. They dismiss them as fantasy, coincidence, imagination. But that's only because they have forgotten the language of the soul, the way spirit writes on flesh, the way eternity whispers through the lines and curves of a face. Because what if I told you that your body, your very face, is not random? What if I told you that there are physical signs written into the skin, the bones, the eyes? Signs that mark those who were never meant to be just human. There are 4 sacred signals, barely perceptible to the untrained eye, but unmistakable to those who know what to look for. These signs have been quietly documented by mystics, scholars, and those who've stood in the presence of the divine and lived to tell the tale. And when they appear together on the same face, they don't just tell a story. They declare a mission, a spiritual lineage, a chosen one, walking the earth in a body that was sculpted for something far greater than the world can see. I know this not because I read it in a book. I know because I've seen it. I've met those people. I've listened to the ones who carry these marks without even knowing what they mean. And I've watched them wrestle with an invisible calling that follows them through every room, every conversation, every moment of silence. They didn't ask for this. They didn't invent it. But it lives in them, etched into their features like ink under the skin of time. But before we continue, I invite you to activate this revelation. If something inside you is stirring, if your soul is whispering, "This is for me," then go to the comments right now and write 444. This number carries the vibration of divine alignment, angelic guidance, and confirmation from the higher realms. By writing it, you're not just commenting. You're declaring to the universe and to your own spirit that you are ready to see what few dare to recognize. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This space isn't just a channel, it's a sacred archive for those who are waking up, those who remember, those who were born already marked, because by the end of this video, you'll know whether you carry one of these signs, or all of them, and what you choose to do with that. Knowing might just change the course of your entire life. There is a reason why, in ancient texts and sacred traditions, the eye has always been called the window to the soul. Not the mouth, not the mind, the eye, because the eye cannot lie. It cannot disguise frequency. It cannot hide what the soul is broadcasting silently. But in certain souls, there is something even more specific, a physical clue, a spiritual anomaly. One eye is visibly more open than the other. Not due to illness or trauma, but as if it were designed to perceive more than this world can offer. This is not about asymmetry or superficial beauty. It's about energetic function. One eye is watching the world. The other is watching beyond it. And if you carry this subtle imbalance, if you've ever noticed that in pictures, in mirrors, one of your eyes seems more alive, more open, more awake, it's not a flaw. It's a calling. It means one part of you has remained tethered to the higher realms, even while the rest of you moves through time like everyone else. Those who carry this mark often feel overwhelmed in crowds, not because they are weak but because they are seeing too much. They sense what others cannot articulate. They perceive motives without being told. Their gaze unsettles people, not because it's aggressive, but because it pierces, it reveals, it disrupts illusions. And it's not uncommon for others to say things like, "I feel like you can see right through me." Because in truth, they can. And what most don't realize is that the soul chose this vessel deliberately. It selected this imbalance not as a defect, but as a spiritual function. One eye always slightly more open, tuned to frequencies beyond speech, beyond science, a divine receptor embedded in flesh. And the one who carries it often wonders why others don't see what they see. Why people lie when the truth is so obvious. Why silence speaks louder than words. But that sensitivity has a cost. It isolates, it confuses, It exhausts. Because when you carry this vision, you're not just looking, you're reading every space you enter. And until you understand what that eye was designed for, it can feel like a burden. Like a curse, but it's not, it's a signature. 1. That heaven placed on those who would act as seers, truth-bearers, energy interpreters in a world still blind. And this is just the beginning. Because when heaven marks a soul, it rarely leaves only one sign. If the eyes are the windows to the soul, then the chin is the foundation, the place where the soul anchors itself into form. And for some, that foundation bears a mysterious mark, a line, a cleft, a subtle indentation running vertically through the center of the chin. It is not merely a feature of genetics or chance. It is a spiritual signature, one that has been overlooked by modern eyes, but revered by the ancients. Because this mark does not represent beauty, it represents division, a sacred split. A soul that has walked through two realms and has chosen to remember both. This line, etched into the bone, is not an accident. It is a seam between two lifetimes. Two realities, two dimensions. Those who bear it often live with an invisible tension. A feeling that they are walking one path in the physical, but another in the unseen. They are here, but also not entirely. Part of them is always in prayer. Always in remembrance, always listening to something no one else can hear. And even when they laugh or engage in daily life, there's a silence inside them that never sleeps. People with this mark often experience duality more intensely than others. They feel both the light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow, the hope and the grief of the world around them. Because their soul did not come here to escape the human experience, but to bridge it. To reconcile heaven and earth through their very presence. The line down their chin is the scar of that agreement. A visual reminder that they carry two truths at once, one that bends to this world, and one that refuses to. This mark can also represent spiritual leadership, not the kind that stands on stages or commands attention, but the kind that holds space for others quietly. The kind that feels pain before anyone else does. The kind that sacrifices their own comfort to protect the sacred. They often don't even realize that they lead. But others instinctively follow them, sense their depth, their wisdom, their gravity. Yet, for the one who bears the line, the responsibility can be crushing. It's hard to live between worlds. It's hard to explain that the ache in your chest isn't just personal, it's prophetic. That you're not just emotional, you're empathic. That what people call drama in you is actually spiritual data passing through a vessel too awake to ignore it. And that sometimes, you fall silent not because you have nothing to say, but because your soul is translating frequencies that have no words. That is the power of the cleft chin, a quiet crack in the mask of illusion. A reminder that the body is a scroll, and God still writes on skin. But there is more. Because not every mark reveals pain. Some carry joy, radiance, divine compassion. Some marks do not cry, they bless, they do not weigh down. They lift. Among the sacred signs written upon the faces of the chosen, there exists one that is often misread as charm, flirtation, or mere cuteness. But in truth, it is a spiritual portal, the subtle curve, the small hollow beside the mouth, what we call a dimple. Few understand its weight. Fewer still carry it. But those who do, whether it appears only when they smile or rests there permanently like a fingerprint of heaven, possess a power that is often unnoticed. Until it is felt, because the dimple is not just a facial feature, it is an energetic transmitter. A place where light breaks through the skin. Where frequencies of comfort, gentleness, and divine presence flow into the atmosphere without a single word being spoken. Those who carry this sign may not even know why strangers feel safe with them, why children instinctively gravitate toward their presence, or why wounded souls begin to open their hearts just by being in the same room. It is because the soul behind the smile carries an unspoken grace, a healing tone. Their laughter doesn't just lift the mood, it realigns vibrations. Their gaze, when softened by a smile, does more than invite connection, it disarms shame, dissolves judgment, and creates space for someone else to be fully human again. And though they may never become public speakers or stage performers, their mere presence delivers messages from realms unseen. You see, heaven does not always thunder. Sometimes it whispers through joy. Sometimes it comforts through kindness. Sometimes it wraps its arms around the brokenhearted through a face that knows how to smile through its own tears. That is what the dimple represents, not perfection, but a soul that has been broken, stitched together, and now chooses to radiate compassion instead of bitterness. And yet, for those who carry this mark, there's also a hidden weight. Because people expect you to always be the light, to smile, to soothe, to be the one who makes others feel safe. But who holds space for you? Who asks if your light needs rest? Often, the ones with the most disarming smiles are the ones who have cried the deepest in silence, who have been rejected, not for their darkness, but for their light. But that's the paradox of your presence. You were sent not only to survive this world, but to transform it from within. And the joy that escapes your lips, even in hard moments, is a language older than words. It tells the universe, I remember who I am. And even if it hurts, I will smile again. So the next time someone tells you your smile is powerful, believe them. It's not a compliment. It's a recognition. A spiritual salute from a soul who may not understand why, but who feels what your presence awakens in them. And what awakens next is even more mysterious. Because some signs are not about light or joy. Some are forged in fire, written in the structure of the face by the hand of discernment itself. In a world obsessed with symmetry, there are faces that carry something far more rare, truth etched into form. And often, that truth begins with the nose. Not because of its shape alone, but because of the energy it carries. Among the chosen, the nose becomes more than an organ of breath. It becomes a vessel of spiritual perception, the seat of divine discernment, and the symbolic bridge between invisible knowing and physical presence. Those with strong, defined, or uniquely shaped noses are often misjudged. They're called intense, too serious, too perceptive. And that's because they are. These souls smell what others cannot see. They sense deception not from logic, but from a knowing that rises from the gut and filters through their breath. They walk into a room and inhale the truth before a word is spoken. It's not just that they read people, it's that people become transparent in their presence. Why? Because the nose in spiritual symbolism represents life force and intuition. In Hebrew, the word for breath ruach is the same as spirit. In the ancient world, prophets were known to cover their faces, not out of shame, but to protect what came through their breath. The chosen ones who carry this mark, whether a nose that is curved, sharp, long, wide, or completely unordinary, have a destiny that requires them to sense what others deny. But this gift is not always welcomed. From a young age, these souls are told to stop being so sensitive, so suspicious, so intense. Yet deep down, they've always known when someone is lying. They've always felt the energy of a room shift when something hidden enters. And they've always carried the burden of truth no one else wants to see. The nose becomes the map, the marking, the silent announcement that this one doesn't believe the surface. This one isn't fooled by performance. This one has the eyes of discernment and the nose to confirm it. That's why many chosen ones have noses that don't conform to beauty standards. Because their face isn't here to impress, it's here to interrupt the illusion. And with that interruption comes resistance. People project onto you. They feel seen in ways they didn't ask for. They may call you arrogant, distant, or harsh. But they are confusing your clarity with cruelty. Because the truth is, your soul didn't come here to be liked. It came here to pierce the fog that your discernment is sacred. And though it may isolate you at times, it is the very tool that will guide you through every test, every betrayal, every moment where darkness pretends to be light. You smell the counterfeit before it speaks. You breathe in the frequencies no one else notices. And even in silence, your knowing protects you. So if you've ever looked at your nose and wondered why it doesn't fit, maybe it's because you were never made to fit in. Maybe it's because your face was sculpted not by man, but by mission. But what happens when the structure of the face changes not because of intuition, but because of divine fire? When tension, refinement, and power all gather behind the brow, and something begins to burn behind the eyes, there's a weight that only the marked ones carry. A pressure that builds behind the brow between the eyes, where thought becomes vision and pain becomes prophecy. It is not just a physical tension. It is a spiritual contraction. Something ancient burning behind the forehead. Something divine trying to break through the shell of personality, doubt, and fear. This is the brow of fire. And it is not given to those who seek comfort. It is forged in the chosen through pain, isolation, and unbearable clarity. You may have felt it an ache behind your eyes when you're near deception. A pulsing in your forehead when you're trying to pretend you're normal. A heat that builds when you're around too much noise, too much superficiality, too much of what this world has normalized as light. But what your spirit registers as artificial, that is not imagination, that is not anxiety. That is activation, because the brow is where the pressure of becoming builds. It's where the truth you carry begins to demand expression. And when you ignore it, when you shrink, when you conform, when you try to turn off the power, it doesn't go away. It intensifies. Because you were not chosen for silence. You were chosen for fire. The fire in your brow is not just for insight. It is for intervention. You are the one who walks into rooms and shifts energy without speaking. You are the one whose stare reveals what people try to hide. And even when you say nothing, your presence speaks louder than most voices ever could. But there's a cost. This fire has made you misunderstood, feared, misread. People say, you're too intense, too serious, too spiritual. But what they really mean is, you make me feel exposed, because you do. You carry a fire that burns away illusions. A gaze that dissolves manipulation. A vibration that calls everything back into alignment. The brow of fire is not a gift, it's a mantle. And those who carry it were often pressed harder than others. More spiritual attacks, more betrayals. More dreams crushed only to rise again. Because fire doesn't come from favor. It comes from the furnace. You were placed in divine heat. Not to destroy you, but to forge a weapon of truth. And now, people may stare at you and feel unease, not because you're wrong, but because your eyes remind them of what they buried. Of what they've avoided. Of who they could become if they were brave enough to face their own fire. You are not crazy for feeling like your forehead burns when you're near falsehood. You are not imagining things when you feel energy piercing. From that space during deep prayer or silence, you're simply remembering who you are. And who you are has been marked by the presence of holy pressure. This is why no amount of makeup, fashion, or blending in will ever make you invisible again. Your fire has risen to the surface. Your brow has become a gate. And whether others acknowledge it or not, they feel it. But what if I told you? There is one final place on the face of the chosen where the divine places its most subtle signature. A place that holds the pain, the laughter, the truth, and the memory of the entire soul's journey on earth. There are chosen ones who barely speak, but when they do, something ancient moves through their voice. It's not about eloquence. It's not about volume. It's not even about persuasion. It's about vibration. It's about the strange feeling that every word they release was not learned, it was remembered. Like echoes rising from the marrow, not from the mind. If you've ever met someone whose lips carried a strange sense of recognition, words you felt before you even heard them, you've witnessed the final mark, the mouth. The point where spirit becomes sound. Where thoughts turn to vibration, and truth travels through the invisible path of breath. And on the faces of many real chosen ones, there's a subtle but recurring detail. One that seems insignificant at first. A small asymmetry near the lips. A slant, a shadow that curves oddly when they speak, or a scar, a mark, even a dimple that wasn't there in childhood, but now frames every sentence with the weight of something sacred. You see, this isn't about deformities. It's not about beauty or imperfection. It's about signature. A soul mark carved not by injury, but by intention. Something placed there to seal the mission of those who carry the final voice of remembrance. Those who were born to remind the world of things it has tried to forget. And strangely, these people tend to have moments in life where their words awaken others. Where a simple phrase triggers tears. Where silence becomes unbearable after they speak, not because of volume but because truth, when it lands, clears the room. Many have this trait and don't even realize it. They feel off when speaking. Some were mocked for how they smile, how they form words, or how their lips don't fit the mold of expected symmetry. But this very discomfort was part of the plan, because their mouth wasn't made to please, only to reveal. To reveal wounds, to stir dormant memories, to unlock frequencies buried beneath layers of human forgetfulness. Ancient mystics used to say that God does not only speak through thunder and fire, but also through the cracked whisper of a marked one. That those who bear this final sign are often healers with no title, prophets without platforms, voices of comfort in a storm not yet understood. They speak when they don't want to. They feel when silence would be safer. But they know deep within that their mouth was carved with purpose. And here lies the secret. When this final sign appears alongside the others, when the eye sees beyond, the brow burns with awareness, the cheeks bear the pressure of presence, the nose discerns, and the mouth speaks truth unfiltered, you're no longer looking at an individual. You're witnessing a vessel that heaven chose to mark fully, not randomly, not genetically, but spiritually. In the world will never see them the same. Now that all has been revealed, you cannot unsee it. You cannot unknow the weight behind your gaze, the ache in your cheeks, the instinct in your breath, the flame in your brow, or the ancient vibration behind your words. Something sacred has stirred, something that was never meant to stay hidden. Beneath the surface of a normal life, you may have doubted it before. You may have stood in front of mirrors trying to erase the evidence. You may have tried to belong, to blend in, to soften what was always meant to stand out. But not anymore. Because now you see it for what it is. Not imperfection, not coincidence, not defect, but designation. Divine markers for divine beings in disguise. These signs on your face were never just biological quirks. They are living proof that your soul signed a contract before entering this body. That your arrival on earth came with instruction, purpose, and visibility in the spirit realm. And no matter how much this world tries to convince you otherwise, no matter how many masks they ask you to wear, your marks speak louder than denial. They whisper, I was sent, I was chosen, I carry something eternal. You were never meant to be invisible. That strange energy people feel around you, that discomfort they can't explain, the way they stare too long or too quickly look away, it's not about you being wrong. It's about your truth unsettling their illusion. You reflect to them a reality they've forgotten, and your face, yes, your very face, becomes a map of awakening. A testimony written not in ink, but in bone and spirit. And let's be honest, there were moments you cursed these signs. When rejection came because you were too intense. When your silence was misunderstood. When love turned away, not because you lacked value, but because you held too much light for them to carry. And yet, you're still here, still walking, still radiating. You didn't collapse. You didn't extinguish the fire. You didn't erase your essence. You chose to remember. And that is your true initiation. The world trained you to think that your purpose would be something external, some stage, some miracle, some spotlight. But the most sacred mission of the chosen ones isn't performance, it's presence. You don't have to convince anyone of who you are, you only have to be. And when you do, the ones with ears to hear, with eyes to see, and with souls ready to rise, will recognize you. And here's the holy irony. The more you remember who you are, the less you will need the validation of those who never had eyes to see you. The more you step into the fullness of your design, the more everything misaligned will fall away. Friends, lovers, habits, environments, they won't survive in your fire. And that's not punishment. That's protection. Because you are entering a new timeline now. One where you no longer chase meaning outside. One where your very breath shapes reality. One where your marks are not hidden, they are honored. Where your presence no longer bends to the comfort of the crowd, but aligns with the frequency of your creator. And when the time is right, when the others awaken, when those whose spirits recognize yours finally lift their gaze, they will see it clearly. The mark in your eyes, the fire in your brow, the memory in your lips. They will not say, "Who is this?" They will say, "There you are." Because they've been waiting to. And that, beloved soul, is the full circle miracle. The signs you tried to erase were always the keys to your recognition. So walk now, not in apology, but in authority. Speak now not to convince, but to awaken. Live now not in waiting, but in divine remembrance. You were marked to be remembered. And heaven never forgets its own. If this message pierced something inside you, if every word felt like it was written for the parts of you that this world tried to silence, then speak back. Write 777 in the comments if you are ready to rise with full remembrance. This number is a divine seal completion, awakening, and alignment with your true spiritual identity. By writing it, you're not just commenting. You're activating your voice. You're confirming your role among the marked dot, and if you haven't yet, subscribe. Not just to a channel, but to the next level of your spiritual journey. Here, every message is a mirror, every word, a map, and every video, a reminder that you are not alone. You were never meant to walk this earth unseen. You were meant to awaken it by your presence,